The Badgers pick up a big piece for that 2025 class. Let's talk about the impact Drayden Pavey may have in this room going forward. Today's Locked On Badgers.
You are Locked On Badgers, your daily podcast on the Wisconsin Badgers. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
What is going on, Badger fans? Welcome to Locked On Badgers, your team every single day. I'm your host, Ryan Herring, part of the Locked On Podcast Network. Really do appreciate everybody tuning in. Today's episode brought to you by FanDuel. Place your first $5 bet. You'll get started with $200 in bonus bets. Go visit FanDuel.com to get started. Big time pickup to talk about today, Justin. Let's sound the cannons.
Another one is headed to Madison on Wisconsin.
All right, Drayden Pavey commits, defensive lineman, interior defensive lineman coming out of Ohio, 6'3", about 305, three-star recruit. Justin, I know this is a dude that you're high on. What do you like about Drayden Pavey's film?
Well, he's tailor-made for nose tackle. Wisconsin really needs more bodies in this particular area. He's a guy that has really good suddenness. And we talked about Elijah Hills when he came in as a guy that had some quickness and ability to kind of shoot gaps. I feel like Pavey's a similar guy to that in terms of his ability to kind of shoot gaps. He's strong. He has the ability to move well with his feet. Some guys don't have that suddenness and ability to kind of just break through the line. He's got some of that. Now, I don't think he's going to be a pass rusher. This is not Keanu Benton, but he's a guy that's going to be able to blow up some plays in the backfield. He's a guy who can stack on the run, that can eat up a double team also and be able to make some plays. And Wisconsin needs all those guys that they can get. Whatever provides some disruption and some ability to hold up in the run game, they'll take all of it.
Yep, and we're going to play some of this film here. And you're right. Like, I think disruption is something you hit on, and that's one of the first things I was taking some notes on, Pavey. We're putting some film up here for watching on YouTube. If you're watching or listening to the podcast, we'll talk through it as well. He's very disruptive. Like, you love the hand ability, right? Some swim moves, he doesn't stay blocked. He's really quick with that. A lot of younger defensive linemen, they kind of lean on people, or at the high school level, they just kind of rely on that natural size that he's got. But he's got quick, violent hands that can get unblocked too. And that's really what you've seen, to your point, a lot with Elijah Hills, where he's just not been blockable because he's really quick disengaging from blockers. I also love he's 305, 300 pounds. You and I talk about this a lot. Getting players that already have that size, where you're not so worried about, well, he's 260. What's he going to look like at 305, 310? You're already seeing it. Like, his body's in a pretty good spot already. The upside in the floor because of that, to me, is much higher.
Absolutely. One of the big things I look at with that is when you have a guy who's 260 coming out of high school, you have to get him up to weight first, and then you have to reshape him. With a guy like this, you're just reshaping him. You're basically cutting down the developmental period that it's going to be required for a guy to get their body physically ready to play at this level. He's grown into his body already. He's comfortable with it, which is another thing that those guys, you never know what you're going to get when you get a guy who's 260. How is he going to move when he hits 305? Will he be able to understand what his body can and can't do? That's something that you already have with Pavey here, where he's got the ability to kind of come in and just work on technique, work on the extra stuff, get the strength up to be able to hold up and play. I think he's a guy that can actually push to play a little bit early. I don't know if that we're talking redshirt freshman or even a guy who might be able to give you a couple of plays here and there like Dylan Johnson has done. I don't believe he's going to be a guy that comes in early, which kind of stinks. You'd like to see him get in the spring because it would give him a massive leg up in terms of being able to play as a freshman. But, at this point, I will take this guy because I think he's got a very high floor, and I think he's a guy you feel very confident is going to add into the two deep and be a guy who'll be productive for you.
Yeah, where do you see him along the D-line? Because this is not like a zero tech. He's not a guy who's going to line up over center. He's more, to me, like a 2, maybe a 1.
I think he can do some of that, but I also think he's versatile enough that you can slide him out.
Yeah,
I think he can do a little bit more with what we've done with Hills, where he plays a little bit, out on the 2. Absolutely. He's got some intriguing ability. I don't think you want him just clogging things up. They have other guys they're bringing in that I think fit that role better. Xavier, who's coming in this next class with him, fits that role a little bit better because he's not as disruptive. He's a little bit probably more stout at the point. Drayden's better at shooting gaps. And I think you'd be stupid to kind of waste him eating up blocks when he's got some ability to be disruptive and get in the backfield.
Yeah, I agree. This feels more like a weapon. This feels more like a guy that you can move along the defensive front, passing situations. He can get into the backfield, which we talk about with Hills. If you can find interior pass rushers, that's one of the most difficult things to find in college football, in football in general, because that blows plays up. It just collapses the pocket in front of quarterbacks. He has some of that. And we're going to get into defensive line recruiting in general here in a second. But this was a guy I didn't mention at the beginning, was committed to Purdue, Wisconsin. He decommitted from Purdue, flipped to Wisconsin. And there were the original offer list for him. And we'll get rid of this over on the side now. The original offer list for him was not a big time offer list, but after he decommitted from Purdue, there were real other schools getting involved here, trying to get involved here, because I think they've seen some of the same things we've seen and that we're seeing on the senior film, which is explosiveness, interior disruption, and ready-made size.
Yeah, and I mean, he's had a big senior year too. Like this is a kid who's definitely shown that he's progressing. What did it say? He had 17 tackles for loss already and 7.5 sacks.
7.5 sacks.
That is insane for an interior guy. Like you hear ends getting high sack totals. He has a chance to be a 10 sack guy for an interior guy. That speaks volumes for what he's doing as a player, as his growth. Because last year he wasn't remotely that. Like he was disruptive last year. He's definitely gotten better at it. Like he's far more comfortable in his body. He's a guy who I think trusts his instincts a lot better this year than he did as a junior. And it's showing. Like he's having a super productive senior year.
Yeah, I love that point there, because I watched his film, his junior film, and I felt not on the fence, because I'm taking any defensive lineman you can get with size. And I felt like this feels like a run stopping guy, like a guy who can be stout and be physical. I'm not sure how disruptive he'll be. And then again, like to your point, he took a big step this year, and now he does look like a version of what Elijah Hills could be. He could develop into that disruptive guy. You got to give him credit, right? He's obviously put work in on the craft and gotten better. I like this film a lot more. I think he's taken a big jump, and I agree. And that's probably also why, not to be a jerk about it, but that's probably why he decommitted from Purdue, right? Schools have cranked it up based on this film.
Yep, that, and also the fact that Purdue's having a year to forget, which definitely makes it easier to want to walk away and be like, hey, we can talk about money all we want. Kids don't want to waste time at a school where they're just going to lose a lot. Like it's really hard to be in college football and play for a team that just is always bad. Like it's crushing. It's like being a job where you constantly have things go wrong all the time. Eventually you get to the point where you just stop caring.
What is Purdue in the job? What is Purdue in the job? Are they like Dunder Mifflin, Purdue? Like what is what is the Purdue equivalent of a job? I don't even know. It is you're right though. Like this season has gone even worse than expected. And if you have all these other opportunities as Drayden Pavey, yeah, why not? You're still going to get NIL opportunities, but you're going to be able to play on a much better team and get developed by better coaches and a better strength and conditioning department. It's hard to turn that down if you're Pavey. Let me ask you this really quick, and then we're going to pivot into kind of defensive line recruiting as a whole. What would you have his ranking at, Pavey, if you were giving him a grade?
Based off of his senior film, I think he's probably in the 88, 89 range. I don't think he's a 4-star guy, but I think there's growth there. Like people need to remember, Keanu Benton did not come in as a 4-star defensive tackle. He was an 85 composite guy who grew a ton, and the wrestling skills translated a lot more than I think people understood. And I don't even think in the spring that he was instantly, like, he was a guy who just picked it up really quick when he got good coaching. It's not something that anyone could have guessed with him. Pavey is a little bit more refined. So you have a guy who's refined, but he doesn't necessarily have the similar level of tools as a guy like Benton, who I think had some really very real first step things that as a pass rusher are just legit top tier things. Like I thought he was underappreciated on the national level in his time at Wisconsin. Like people didn't understand. You and I were talking about he should be a fringe first round guy as an interior. And I still stand by that. And it's proving out now in the NFL. Pavey is a guy who I think can definitely be an NFL guy by the time he leaves here if everything comes together. I think he's got the body. I think he's got some quickness, and he's going to have to just continue to grow. That's what I'm looking for here. When I look at this class, as we kind of start moving over into the D-line group, I look at him and Xavier, how do you say his last name?
Ukponu.
Ukponu? Okay. Xavier Ukponu. Those are two guys with very high floors to me. Those are two guys that I look at in this class that I'm like, these guys I feel very confident are going to be productive players at Wisconsin. And they still have some upside to be potential NFL upside to them. Like they have a translatable skill that will carry on. The other two guys are guys that are going to take developmental time.
Well, let me pause you there because we got to take a break. And we'll come out of the break with that 25 and 24.
Right. That's fair. That's fair. I get ahead of myself, man. You got to cut me off. I'm like a runaway freight train.
All good, but that's the next topic anyway. So coming up, Locked On Badgers, we're going to talk about have the Badgers kind of restocked and retooled those defensive line rooms. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick word for our friends of the show over at LinkedIn. And what a great sponsor when we're talking recruiting. LinkedIn's all about talent acquisition, like finding the right talent for your organization. And whether you're in sports, like we're talking sports right now, or you're selling vending machines, you need to find the 5-star vending machine repairman. Like you find that on LinkedIn. You go find those pieces that you need for your organization so you can plug them in like Legos and keep moving on faster and better and stronger, more efficiently. That's what you do at LinkedIn. The absolute best professional marketing platform in the world. Small businesses love it. They continue to rank it highly for a reason. It is the place to find all the right talent as a hiring manager. Save money, save time. LinkedIn Jobs helps you find the qualified candidates you want to talk to faster. Post your job for free over at linkedin.com/lockedoncollege. Terms and conditions to apply. All right, let's jump back into this with Justin. And let's talk, again, big picture here. When this coaching staff came in, this defensive line room, you did a whole segment on it on your own over on the Bucky Report. There was not enough bodies. We talked about it. We acknowledged it. The previous staff honestly did not recruit this position well enough. That's just is what it is.
Both through quality and through numbers, they did not remotely do enough. And that's why honestly, when Fickle came in, this was going to happen. Like there was going to be a massive step back, even with Leonard here, because there were no bodies there. The cupboard was bare. When Benton went pro, there was nobody left to lean on that was going to be ready. And that was a massive problem. And that problem happens because you don't backfill when you lose guys to make sure that you have enough bodies to take care of it on the defensive side. That has been a problem. It was one of the low-key things that nobody paid attention to in the Chris time there. Happened at running back, happened at tight end where we experienced a lot of injuries and guys walking away from the game, happened at
quarterback
at times. Yeah, quarterback. Happened at the defensive line. It just took a long time because we had guys that like walk-ons like Henningsen who turn into a player, or Benton who covers up the fact that there's not a lot of depth there. But we were really limited in terms of the guys that we had there. And then I look at it, like I brought up, I used Iowa as a comparison. Iowa at the time, during the same period of time, we brought in like 6 guys. They brought in like 21 for the defensive line. Now I realize they play a 4-3 and we play a 3-4 or 2-4-5. Even if we're playing a 2-4-5, you have to have at least 9 bodies in there. Like you're going to have guys that walk away from the game. You're going to have guys that get injured. You cannot afford to play with this few lottery tickets, so to speak.
Yep. And you always need guys in the hopper on the defense line. It's a conveyor belt. You always have to have a number 2 group, a number 3 group, because that 3 group is going to be moving up to the 2 group. And I'd almost put it like this. You could never have too many defensive linemen in college football. That's what Georgia's done. That's what the best schools have done. They just say, we're going to have 3 lines, and we're just going to rotate 3 different lines out throughout the game. And Wisconsin was at the point where they couldn't do it with 2 lines.
Yeah.
So in the last 2 classes, Fickle and company have brought in 7 bodies. Now, that number's a little nebulous depending on how you want to classify some people. You and I both think certain guys will end up there that aren't classified there.
But it actually might be higher. Yeah.
It might be higher. Exactly. That's the point. Because I personally think a guy like Samuel Leteju probably ends up on the defensive line with his hand in the dirt.
And I agree with you there. I think it really depends on what type of defense we're playing. If we're playing a 2-4-5, he's probably an edge. If we're playing a 3-3-5, he's going to be a hand down guy. He's going to be your strong side defensive end. That's going to be responsible. But he's going to have the thing is that people don't understand there is he'll be a strong side defensive end, but he's also going to be a guy who's going to be capable of rushing the passer. Like he's not going to be a traditional strong side end. They're going to expect disruption from him.
I love Leteju, by the way. That's one of my pick it to click it guys in this 25 class. Here's my question for you. Is the 25 class good enough? Defensive line recruiting. If they do this every year, 3 to 4 bodies at this level, and let me read through that class really quick for anybody that needs a refresher. In the 25 class, they've landed Torrin Pettaway, the Wisconsin kid, Wilnerson Telemaque, the 6'5" Florida end, and then 2 inside guys, Pavey and Xavier Ukponu, who we talked about. Is this a good enough class for Wisconsin?
I think yes, but this has to be your floor. I think I like every guy that they're bringing in for various reasons, whether it be upside or things that I think will translate quickly. But you still need to get a couple of those freak of nature guys that you can bring in, like Dylan Johnson last cycle or Willer, that you can add to that room that are guys that are hopefully a quick impact and also provide upside that some of these guys just don't have. But these guys give you this class. I look at it and I'm like, it won't shock me if every one of these guys ends up being a productive player here and provides a lot of depth in that room. I just don't look at anybody that's a game wrecker. And that's fine. Yeah. Like they can just be really good players yet, and they may have a role, but there's nobody I look at them like this guy's going to be an NFL top 3 round pick.
Well, and I would say this too, because on the surface, I agree with you. I don't see an obvious star there. Defensive line, offensive line, some of these positions are hard to project. And this is a spot where some of these guys might outplay some of those projections. And you mentioned Keanu Benton.
For sure.
Great example of this.
We just can't assume. Yeah.
But Matt Henningsen, Isaiah Loudermilk, like there's some guys who have outplayed their projections. What room do you like more? The 24 room or the 25 room? And there's a little bit of hindsight here because we've seen the 24 guys on campus for a year, right? And maybe they haven't flashed quite as much as hoped or not.
When we talk about specific roles, I like some of the guys in the 25 class because I can see it translating. Like Ukponu, I look at him and I'm like, man, he's just going to be really good against the run. Like he's going to be so hard for a center and a guard, even if they're doubling up on him to push him off the ball. And I think Pavey is another guy who I think is going to be able to come through and it really translates. I look at 24 and my biggest question there is, will you be able to get Johnson to play consistently at a heavy enough weight that he doesn't wear down? Because he's probably going to be somewhere where he struggles to be like, what do you think his max is, like 305? Like I can't see anything bigger than that.
Yeah, I think his ideal weight, he's like a 295 guy.
Yeah,
somewhere.
And I agree with that.
But that's big enough to play a consistent role.
Yeah, if you want him to be disruptive, he's absolutely fine at that. And he's super strong. Like we watched his high school film, the guy never moved backwards. The issue that I have with that is at 295, if you lean on him for a whole game, at some point he's going to start to break. Some of these other guys I feel it's less likely with because they just have the body. Like the frame is like Pavey's a little bit bigger. He's 6'3" instead of 6'2". He's 305 already, so he'll probably be able to play at 315. So you have guys that fit that role a little bit better. Ukponu is probably going to be in the 315 range too. You think about that. Like they could have 2 massive guys in the middle, and then you have Johnson who's capable of kind of being almost like a slide around guy who can play the same position to like Leteju and also have some versatility. Like they could have a brick wall there almost with those 3 guys out there in run packages.
Dude, I love the depth they're building up on the interior. With Ukpono's built like a little tank. I mean, he's just not going to get moved.
And he's got like he's not slow. Like if you look at him and it's like the disruption, like he's not going to be a disruptive guy, but like he's quick enough where like the initial first step is there. It's just not going to translate to him being in the backfield. It's going to translate to making offensive linemen uncomfortable. Mm-hmm. It's just not going to translate to him being able to knife through and blow up plays.
I really like, I'll say this, if you're comparing the two sides, I really like the depth of the 24 class. I think 1 through 4, I feel interested in all of them from different reasons. I think the upside on Willer and Johnson, especially when they were recruited and committed, there's maybe a little more upside with those two. But Wilnerson, to me, this defensive line class really hinges on what Pettaway and Telemaque,
I agree with that.
Because I think the interior guys, to me, are both high floor guys. And I feel as good as I can feel about a 2025 commit, because let's be real here. Like all sorts of things can happen. Those two outside guys are kind of raw balls of clay. And where they develop, it's hard to say with those two.
You and I feel exactly the same way looking at them, because I look at them and I'm like, and nothing would surprise me. They could end up being the 2 best players on the defensive line. They could also be not even wash out. Yeah, I mean, they could absolutely wash out. It's going to really depend how hard they're willing to work, because they have a lot of development ahead of them.
Mm-hmm. Now they're coming into a good spot, right? Brady Collins. I think we love the pickup of Whitlow. That's the other thing that you factor into this. He's a
really good coach.
Yeah,
you can see the growth as the season goes on with him.
And Coach Parcells would always talk about this. Now, for him, it was with the draft, but recruiting similar. He said, "Let me shop for my ingredients because I know what I want."
Yeah.
Well, Whitlow and this staff, I feel, is kind of like that. Let him get the ingredients he wants, and then let him cook. And I think Whitlow can cook. I think that's a tremendous hire, and you see it.
Like Blazek on the opposite side. Like they both these are guys who get it and understand what they're looking for.
100%. All right. Any last thoughts, defense line recruiting? Because I don't want to get your take on why Penn State's going to wax us, Justin, because that's what every Penn State fan thinks.
I think we're in a good spot for 2 cycles in a row. I'm happy with where we're at in terms of it. I want it like now we're in hurry up and wait mode because it's like we have these guys and it's like I just want to see them 2 years from now. I want to see how good these guys actually are because we're struggling this year with the depth. And Whitlow's doing an admirable job with this group, but you kind of look at it and you're like, man, I really wish they had the depth going forward where it's like we can cycle through guys and we can just blow up the run consistently, kind of like the old Wisconsin teams did when we were just dominant against the run. And at some point we'll have that, but we'll be able to be disruptive to a point too, which is Hills has done a great job, but there's not really a second guy that's shown too much of that yet. And I think going forward, that will be a thing. There's going to be second level guys coming in that are going to be capable of still blowing up plays.
Yeah, I'm excited for a couple years down the road when these defensive line classes are redshirt sophomores, redshirt freshmen, redshirt juniors. You start stacking those groups together. It's going to be really exciting to see more depth there and more athletic ability, quite frankly. Mm-hmm. All right, we're going to take a very quick second for our friends of the show. Come back, and we're going to talk about to Justin about why Penn State's so amazing and how Wisconsin doesn't have much of a chance this weekend, according to Penn State fans. That's coming up next on Locked On Badgers. But first, a quick break. Again, quick second for our friends of the show over at FanDuel. FanDuel is awesome. FanDuel is the number one sportsbook for a reason. They are fast, simple, easy. Spice up your sports weekend with FanDuel, the official sportsbook of the Locked On Podcast Network. And again, Wisconsin plus 6.5 this week. If you listened to our show last week, a lot of us had that cover. If you listened to the show 2 weeks ago, I was wrong, but other people were right about Rutgers and Wisconsin covering there. So FanDuel, Justin among them on the show, Justin and Curtis specifically, and JB. Got to give JB his props too. But FanDuel is the spot to get all your action. Spice up your weekend. Please do it responsibly over at FanDuel.com. $5 bet gets you started with $200 bonus bets guaranteed. That's FanDuel.com. All right, let's jump back into this. Let's talk some Penn State. Justin, let's talk some Penn State. Penn State fans extremely confident here. I don't know if you saw my crossover with Locked On Nittany Lions. That guy does not have a whole lot of fear for Wisconsin. And maybe he shouldn't. Number 3 team in the country, undefeated. Your thoughts?
I mean, he apparently didn't have a big fear for Bowling Green either, and they almost took him out. USC, who's now under 500, who almost took them out also and was beating them. So they might want to reevaluate when they look at this. Their team is not playing like an undefeated team. Like they're playing a lot of games close. And I've said the same thing. They remind me of Miami in a way a little bit, where you keep looking at them and you're like, you guys are playing with fire. You just keep letting teams hang around that shouldn't, that have a chance of blowing up your season. And Penn State's kind of got some of that. Like this team is not a dominant team in the way that you'd like to see a really good top 5 team. Their offensive line is really mediocre. I think they're really talented running backs, but if you don't have a good line to kind of set you up for success, it puts those running backs in a place where they have to create for themselves. Mm-hmm. And that's not easy to do, especially if you're playing against a disciplined defense. I would give the edge in our front 7 against their offensive line in the run game. I would give Wisconsin the edge at this point. I think we've proven that we can hold down a team, and they haven't been good the last couple weeks or the last couple games, Penn State, at running the football. If they're not capable of being able to provide a run threat against Wisconsin, they're going to struggle because Wisconsin's strength is their secondary. And they don't really have a receiver other than their tight end that you look at and say, this is a guy that I'm really afraid of in terms of their ability to have a huge game and take over. So it's kind of like that same thing with Wisconsin. Like you look at Wisconsin's receivers and you're like, these guys are being productive. They're getting some things done. There's nobody you look at and be like, this guy just does it every week. He's going to go out there and he's going to give me 80 yards and a touchdown. There's nobody on Penn State like that. That's a problem for them because you look at that game and they can say, well, it's the way Kotelnicki works. I watched Kotelnicki when he was at Kansas too, and they had guys that were consistently productive players. They had wide receivers that he was really good with. Penn State just doesn't have those guys. Like they're fighting for it with Wisconsin, kind of the same way Wisconsin is, where you're trying to get guys out there that can consistently make plays for you, and you're just kind of looking wherever you can get it. And they don't. The one thing I will say is they don't really have a Pauling, a guy who can go get 6-7 catches. Most of their guys are under 300 yards, and Wisconsin doesn't really have that either. But they also have a lot more passing yards than we do. So
yeah, I was going to say, I don't know if we have a Pauling this year either. I missed last year's Pauling. I will say this, like, you're right. I think their receiver room, especially by their standards, I think is mediocre. I don't think
There's no Dotson on that team.
Nope, there's definitely no Dotson on that team. Or you go even further to like a Robinson. There's none of those guys on that team. They do have a Tyler Warren, who is a very, very good tight end, but at some point he's not going to catch 17 passes for 200 yards.
And he's inconsistent too. Like you look at it, he's got a 150-yard game, a 200-yard game, and then in the other 3 games he's played, he's got 150. So he'll put up numbers, but he's not necessarily a guy you can look at and say this guy's going to go get me 100.
Let me ask you this.
He definitely is capable of it, but it's not something that he does all the time.
I was going to say, I think there's an element of him having that huge game a couple weeks before we get to play them that, like, Wisconsin's not going to be surprised by some of that stuff they pulled out with Warren. Mm-hmm. They pulled a lot of gimmicks is the wrong. Well, no, they had a lot of trickery with Warren. And that's on film now. Like, it's not going to be as easy to unlock Warren in Madison when Wisconsin has seen what he did against USC. I think that's a fair assumption. I also think there is very much an element of Penn State just came off a bye, and I know I had the Locked On Nittany Lions host on, and he thinks that's a good thing. And in some ways it is. Like, you get fresher, you don't get hurt.
He has apparently looked at Franklin's record.
It's not great.
It's terrible.
You're coming off a bye where no matter how aggressive you want to be in the bye, it's a ramp down from activity. Mm-hmm. And Wisconsin is coming in having won 3 straight in dominant fashion, and now they have a night game at home. There's an element where Wisconsin starts much faster than Penn State in this game.
Mm-hmm. Or that they play fast but sloppy. Like that's always a risk when you're not used to being out there. When you get out of your habits, and you haven't had to play with the energy that Wisconsin has because Wisconsin didn't have that week off. So we're just the pedal's down, and Wisconsin's got a lot to prove yet. This is a game that Wisconsin, for better or worse, Luke Fickell's looking for a game where he can plant his flag and say, "This is us. We're here to play now."
I agree.
Penn State is the game that I personally think the coaching staff is targeting with the remainder of the season. I think they want to make a statement in this game, and they want to come out and they want to prove, listen, this isn't a team that's far superior to you in terms of athletically. Go out there and get it done. Like the best unit, I've told you several times that I feel this way. The best unit in this game is Wisconsin's offensive line. Like I think that they're capable of holding up in the passing game. Now don't get me wrong, Penn State's going to be able to rush the passer, but I think that they're going to be able to, for the most part, not turn into a train wreck when they see some of that pass rush from Penn State.
Yeah, that is the Penn State game plan, right? Because they're not giving up a ton per carry. You can argue about strength of competition in terms of teams that have been able to run the ball.
And they really haven't played a really good run team, either.
I agree. But their goal, that's their goal. Get them to 3rd and 7. Get them to 3rd and 8. Because they do have elite athletes in the front 7. They have really strong pass rushers. Wisconsin's offense line will have a challenge. Like they'll have their hands full on 3rd and 8, 3rd and 9, 3rd and 10. Because Tom Allen is also a good defensive coordinator, right? He's an experienced guy. But quite frankly, I think Wisconsin is going to be able to run the ball decently on them. I think they're going to be able to get into 3rd and 4 instead of 3rd and 8. And that opens up the whole playbook. Give me the biggest key to the game for you. And I'll lead off for me because I know we talked about it. I think it comes down to Brayden Locke and ball security. I think there's a lot of things that matter in this game. You have to get a clean Brayden Locke game. You cannot have the fumble in the pocket and then the deep throwaway interception. You can't have the 2 turnover Brayden Locke game. You can't have it this week.
Yeah, I think to me it's just the run game in general. Like if we're capable of, if we can run the ball on them consistently and there are 2 things that are going to come of that. Those athletes are going to get tired because they're not a big defensive line. Wisconsin's going to be careful. You got Carter off the edge. He's like 230 pounds. That's a guy that's going to wear down if you can just keep pounding on him for the entire game and not let him pin his ears and pass rush. And then maybe by the 4th quarter, if you're in a game, it's a tight game and you have a touchdown or a field goal lead, you just keep leaning on that guy and wait for him to break because he's going to be gassed having somebody like Nelson or whoever lean on him the whole time in the pass game or in the run game. That makes a difference. Like, I think this offensive line is built to basically do what we want to do in this game, which is to get into good situations and just pound. And Tawee Walker is exactly what you want for this game because he's a back who's like, I'll carry it 30 times and I'm going to sit there and that first guy's going to hit me and he's going to bounce off because that's just the way it works with him. Like he's a guy you have to gang tackle. He's a little fire hydrant that runs out there. And when you try to come high on him, you fall off because he's twisting and churning his legs the whole time. And he just weasels his way for an extra 3 or 4 yards every time. And if that's the way it plays, like you cannot sit there. If Penn State is throwing single guys at him, it's kind of like Braylon Allen when Braylon Allen was running hard. you're going to bounce off of this guy. Like he's going to come up. And if you try to do kill shots on him, you're not going to mess up Tawee Walker. Like he's just too stout.
Yeah. I loved a couple of the descriptive words you used there. Fire hydrant and weasel. Like he does just weasel his way through contact.
Mm-hmm.
And he's also I'd say this, a lot of big backs, and Braylon Allen wasn't great at this. A lot of big backs struggle with leverage, right?
Yeah.
Not Tawee Walker. He's like
5'8", which makes it really easy for him to get under guys.
And he embraces that 5'8" stature. He gets low and he's got the big thighs, and people just kind of bounce off him, man. It's like a wrecking car. So yeah, I agree there. I think running game is an enormous key to this game. I'm gonna let you go on this one. I know you got a show coming up with Rajiv on your show, so I'm not gonna ask you to make a score prediction, but what is your confidence coming into this weekend? By the way, my score prediction is Wisconsin 24, Penn State, or Wisconsin 27, Penn State 24. I got the Badgers pulling the upset.
I was actually thinking similar score. I actually flipped mine to 27-21, but yeah, I'm in the same ballpark on that.
Let's go. I tell you, nothing makes me want to beat them more than seeing a bunch of comments from Penn State fans talking about how trash we are. So yeah, I'm even more fired up now. We will be there that weekend as my camera started randomly following me again. Badger fans, thank you so much for tuning in. That guy is Justin. Go check out their work on Bucket Report. This is the Locked On Badgers. When you're done here, go check out Locked On Big Ten, all the biggest conference news around the college football season over on the Locked On Big Ten, Locked On Podcast Network. With that, on Wisconsin, and we will talk later.